Good morning, everyone. The topic for today's UG clinic is diabetic retinopathy. So, definitely, you won't be given a case of diabetic retinopathy as it involves ophthalmoscopic examination and slit lamp examination. But again, it is a very important topic with respect to your theory exams and your practical viva. What is diabetic retinopathy? It is a chronic progressive sight threatening disease of retinal microvascular associated with prolonged hyperglycemia and other conditions linked to diabetes such as hypertension. So, retinal microvascular pathology. What it means is it will affect only the smallest of the arteries or veins. It will not affect the larger veins and arteries. And it is associated with prolonged hyperglycemia, that is long duration of increased blood sugar level or BSL. So you should know the normal levels of BSL. Now postprandial measurements of BSL and fasting measurements are more specific as compared to random, that you all already know. So BSL PP should always be less than 200 milligram per deciliter and fasting levels should always be less than 125 milligram per deciliter. A better way of looking into the glycemic control is keeping a track of the HB1AC, which is glycated hemoglobin. Glycated hemoglobin should always be less than 7. And it is also associated with conditions which are linked with diabetes, such as hypertension. Now, the total number of people with diabetes is projected to rise from 285 million in 2010 to 439 million in 2030. Diabetes remains a leading cause of legal blindness between the ages of 25 to 65 years in the Western world. It is responsible for 1.8 million of the 37 million cases of blindness throughout the world, accounting to 4.9%. And 33% of these diabetics are patients who are suffering from diabetic retinopathy as well. Now, this chart enumerates the recommended eye examination schedule for diabetics. So, you know there are two types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. So, in type 1 diabetes, diabetic retinopathy develops within 20 years, and in type 2 diabetics, diabetic retinopathy develops within 7 years. So, in type 1 diabetes, the recommended time of first examination is 3 to 5 years after diagnosis, and in type 2, the recommended time of first examination is at the time of diagnosis of the diabetes and during pregnancy. That is, if diabetes is detected just prior to pregnancy, be it type 1 or type 2, then recommended time of first examination should be prior to conception and early in the first trimester. Very important now, risk factors for developing diabetic retinopathy. First and foremost is duration of diabetes, which is the most important risk factor. In patients diagnosed with diabetes before the age of 30, the incidence of developing diabetic retinopathy after 10 years is 50% and after 30 years is 90%. It appears that duration is a stronger predictor for proliferative disease than for maculopathy, which I will be discussing in the slides ahead. Then second is poor control of diabetes. Third is pregnancy because of hormonal fluctuations. The risk of progression is related to the severity of diabetic retinopathy in the first trimester. Then hypertension, which is very common in patients with type 2 diabetes and should be rigorously controlled. Tight control appears to be particularly beneficial in type 2 diabetes. Then nephropathy, if it is severe, is associated with worsening of diabetic retinopathy. Then other risk factors which include hyperlipidemia, smoking, cataract surgery, obesity and anemia. Pathogenesis of diabetic retinopathy. So in diabetics, what happens is there is accumulation of glycosylated products in the pericytes leading to loss of pericytes. Now what are pericytes? These are cells which lie external to the endothelial cells of the capillaries and have multiple pseudopodial processes that envelope these capillaries. Now pericytes have contractile properties and are thought to participate in autoregulation of the microvascular circulation. So a loss of this pericyte leads to proliferation of the endothelial cells and hence lead to the pathologies which occur in the diabetic retinopathy. The symptom of diabetic retinopathy is usually gradual progressive diminution or blurring of vision. The signs are very important in a case of diabetic retinopathy. So the first sign to occur are microaneurysms. What are they? They are localized saccular outpouchings of the capillary wall that are formed either by focal dilatation of the capillary wall where the pericytes are absent or by fusion of two arms of a capillary loop. So because of loss of pericytes, there is basically endothelial cell proliferation, and these proliferations appear as saccular outpouchings. So the first picture shows the fundus photo. The circular yellow thing which you see is the disc, and temporal to it, the hyperpigmented orangish area which you see is the fovea. What is shown with the blue arrows are small tiny dots which represent the microaneurysms. Similarly, in the second photo also you can see very small tiny red dots which are the microaneurysms. Second are hemorrhages. So there are three types of hemorrhages which you can see in diabetic retinopathy: dot, blot, or flame shaped hemorrhages. Now, dot hemorrhages, as the name suggests, are very small, tiny hemorrhages, and they are often confused with the microaneurysms. And blot hemorrhages are, suppose, like how it appears if a dot is blotted. So it will be little bigger than the dot, but yet smaller. And the flame shaped hemorrhages are the larger hemorrhages. So why the difference in size is because the dot and blot hemorrhages lie in the deeper layers of the retina, whereas the flame shaped hemorrhages are superficial hemorrhages, hence their size is bigger. So dot and blot mainly occur in between the outer plexiform layer and the inner nuclear layer, whereas the flame shaped hemorrhages occur at the retinal nerve fiber layer. So in the fundus picture, this very small dots which you see are the dot hemorrhages, and the slightly bigger ones, a slight little bigger than the dots, are the blot hemorrhages, and the larger patchy red areas which you see are the flame shaped hemorrhages. The third sign which you see are hard exudates. Hard exudates are basically composed of lipoprotein and lipid filled macrophages, and they appear waxy yellow in color with distinct margins, and they will be often close to leaking microaneurysms. So in the fundus photo, the blue arrow indicating these yellow waxy colored lesions are the hard exudates. Fourth sign is IRMAs, or intraretinal microvascular abnormalities. These appear as fine irregular red intraretinal lines that run from the arterioles to venules without crossing any major blood vessels. So these are basically arteriovenous shunts which occur in the ischemic retina. So on the photo on the lower hand side, you can see some vessels developing in between the bigger vessels, and these are basically IRMAs. So this is the ETDRS, that is the early treatment of diabetic retinopathy study classification for diabetic retinopathy. This categorizes or grades diabetic retinopathy into non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy or NPDR, then proliferative diabetic retinopathy or PDR, and then advanced eye disease. Now NPDR is again divided into no diabetic retinopathy, in which review is to be done after 12 months for the patient, then very mild NPDR, in which again review is to be done after 12 months, then mild NPDR, in which review is to be done from between 6 to 12 months, moderate NPDR, in which review is to be done 6 monthly, severe NPDR, in which review is to be done every 4 months, and then very severe NPDR, where review is to be done 2 to 3 monthly. Then comes proliferative diabetic retinopathy or PDR, which is divided into mild to moderate PDR, where there are new vessels on the disc, as we can see on the first fundus picture. New vessels on the disc, or NVD. The irregular small tufts of vessels which you see are the NVDs. These, if they are present around the disc, are known as new vessels on the disc, that is NVD, and if it is present elsewhere on the retina, they are known as new vessels elsewhere, or NVE. Then comes high risk PDR, which contains NVDs which are about half disc area, then any size NVD along with vitreous hemorrhage, or NVE, which are greater than half the disc area along with vitreous hemorrhage. Then lastly, the advanced eye disease, which contains vitreous hemorrhage, tractional retinal detachment, as you can see on the second picture, and then neovascular glaucoma, or neovascularization of the iris. Before discussing CSME, first I would like to tell you what is macular edema. So all the signs which we have discussed, the hemorrhages, the exudates, if they are present in the macular area, it is known as macular edema. And macular edema can be detected in imaging modalities such as the optical coherence tomography. Now, what is clinically significant macular edema? CSME is detected on clinical examination, like on fundoscopy. So retinal thickening within 500 micron meter of the center of the macula, or exudates within 500 micron meter of the center of the macula if associated with retinal thickening. The thickening itself may be outside the 500 micron meter. And thirdly, retinal thickening one disc area or larger, any part of which is within one disc diameter of the center of the macula. If these three or any of these criteria meets, then it is known as clinically significant macular edema. The first picture is that of mild NPDR, where there are few hemorrhages in the superior-temporal quadrant. Second picture is that of moderate NPDR, where there are hemorrhages and few exudates involving 1 to 3 quadrants. In severe NPDR, you can see that there are multiple hemorrhages in almost all the 4 quadrants along with hard exudates. And the last picture is of proliferative diabetic retinopathy, where there are multiple hemorrhages and multiple exudates in all the quadrants, and inferiorly there is a large amount of vitreous hemorrhage. Management of diabetic retinopathy, the first and foremost thing to do is glycemic control, because until and unless the blood sugar levels are brought to control, no treatment is going to give benefits. Hence glycemic control is very important. Then lifestyle modification, which aids in glycemic control, and that includes smoking and alcohol cessation, exercise and weight control. Then blood pressure control, cholesterol control, and supporting renal functions. Then medically we can provide laser photocoagulation, intravitreal injection of anti-VEGFs, and lastly, if there is tractional retinal detachment or large amount of vitreous hemorrhage, we have to go for pars plana vitrectomy.